Good afternoon, this is From the South. We begin in news from Latin America. Thousands of Cubans celebrated July 26th in Sancti Spiritus. The date marks the anniversary of Fidel Castro's attack on the Moncada barracks, essentially the start of the Cuban Revolution. July 26th is also the namesake of the movement that carried out the Cuban Revolution. Cuban President Raúl Castro led the festivities. Combatants of the Cuban Revolution were also in attendance.
Venezuela's opposition has been insisting that the National Electoral Council deliver today its final verdict on the 1% of signatures that it collected to activate this first phase of the process towards a recall referendum against President Nicolas Maduro, and they want the CNE to set a date for the next phase when the opposition will have to collect 20% signatures from 20% of the electoral roll to request the holding of that referendum. They say that's still possible to hold a referendum this year. For its part, the National Electoral Authority has been taking a more low-key approach. It says that it's going through all the stages. It may simply deliver its report today without a big public announcement, and without, at this stage, setting a date for the next stage. And on the government's part, most people in the government are saying it's now impossible to go through all those procedures and hold a recall referendum this year. And if there are many allegations of irregularities and fraud in the first phase have to be dealt with legally or in the courts, that's even more unlikely. Ian Bruce, teleSur's, Caracas.
A new Brazilian poll by Ipsos says that more than half of the country supports holding early presidential elections this year. Among the 52% of Brazilians who support this view, 38% said that interim President Michel Temer should stay in office before early elections, and 14% responded that they would prefer seeing Dilma Rousseff return as their country's president before an early vote is held.
After 56 days of protests in the streets and the occupation of class buildings in the different campuses of the Honduras National University, the student movement MEU began a dialogue with the board of directors and special guests on both sides to try and find a solution on the recently approved academic reforms that the students assure attempts against the right of public education.
Today is a historic day for the university. The installation of a dialogue table after several attempts with the directors of the university. After 75 fellow students have judicial accusations, today we are beginning a dialogue to talk about the academic reforms that exclude and that have outraged the students, because these reforms are heading to exclusion and the commodification of education.
ISMAEL Moreno is one of the guests invited by the students for the dialogue. He is the director of the communication and investigation team of the JESUIT in Honduras. He is one of the voices that have supported the students against the attitude of the university leadership that follows the example of the Honduran state, and in the last weeks, they have preferred criminalization and repression instead of dialogue.
Si hay déficit de diálogo o ausencia de diálogo,
if there is a deficit of dialogue, or the lack of it in Honduran society, it is logical that this happens also in the university. But because the university is the highest level of education in Honduras, it has the responsibility to respond to this lack of dialogue.
Students are demanding a complete derogation to the academic reforms, and they also demand that there be students' elections for student representatives to be included in the university's government, who will also be part of the decision-making process. Gerardo Torres, teleSur, Honduras.
Now on to world news, and it's not a pretty roundup. More than 3,000 refugees have already died this year while trying to cross the Mediterranean into Europe. According to the International Organization for Migration, this number is up more than 50% than last year. Nearly 250,000 refugees have made the dangerous journey this year. This includes Syrians fleeing war, Afghans, and Iraqis. Despite the humanitarian crisis in these regions, Europe has further secured its borders against refugees and failed to address the root causes of the crisis. Two assailants who claim loyalty to the Islamic State group entered a church in Normandy, France, forced an elderly priest to his knees, and slit his throat. It was the latest in a wave of attacks in Europe inspired by the Islamist militant group based in Iraq and Syria. The Islamic State group is on the defensive against a US-led military coalition in which France is a major partner. The attackers took several worshippers hostage before police shot them dead. Al-Qaeda-aligned jihadist group Shabab is being blamed for a suicide attack in Somalia that resulted in the death of 13 people. According to police, twin bombings took place near UN and African Union buildings. next to Mogadishu's airport. Reports are that the Shabab group released a statement saying it was a suicide attack by its militants. 19 people have been killed in Japan by a man targeting mentally disabled people at a care center. 26-year-old Satoshi Ilmatsu said he was a former employee of the center. He turned himself in at a police station after the massacre. 25 people were also wounded in the attack, 20 of them seriously.
Palestinian prisoner was reportedly injured after an Israeli special unit raided a prison ward in Israel's Ofer prison on Monday. A statement issued by the Palestinian Committee of the Prisoners' Affairs said that prisoner Malik al-Zaqiq was taken to solitary confinement after he was brutally beaten along with his fellow detainees during a raid on Section 15 of the Ofer prison, known as the National Unity Section. The section includes Palestinian detainees of different political affiliations.
The Palestinian people are engaged in a comprehensive battle against the Zionist enemy for freedom, independence, and the right of return and self-determination. Our brothers in the Israeli jails are leading the battle against the Israeli occupation. Recently, they have launched hunger strikes to escalate protests against the administrative detention of Comrade Bilal Kayet by Israeli authorities.
Meanwhile, 50 Palestinian prisoners in various Israeli prisons announced that they will start a hunger strike Tuesday as a first step to escalate action in solidarity with other hunger-striking prisoners who are presently held in administrative detention without a charge or trial. Among them are Bilal Kayed, Muhammad and Mahmoud Bulbul, Malik al-Qadi, and Iyad Hraymi. Palestinian prisoners commonly resort to hunger strike as a way of protesting their arbitrary arrest by Israeli authorities. At least 7,000 Palestinians are being held in prisons across Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Of these, 700 are administrative detainees, so they are held without a charge or trial. Nuhazin Tlusu TV, Gaza.
Finally, in sports, international athletes continue to arrive in Rio de Janeiro for next month's Olympic Games, amid a rush by officials to complete the Olympic Village to better accommodate the sportsmen and women. Earlier this week, Australia had boycotted the village due to incomplete accommodations. It's hoped that all will be ready by Wednesday. Meanwhile, Brazil's sailing team said Tuesday that not enough had been done to tackle pollution in Rio de Janeiro's Guanabara Bay. This comes after health experts advised Olympic athletes competing in the upcoming games to keep their mouths closed in the water because of high pollution levels. And that's all for today. More on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English.